A very warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer, the vlog which explores and celebrates the London art scene. I'm George Dopamine. Coming up, today I want to take you inside Tate Modern's newly opened show, focusing on the work of Argentinian artist Julio Le Parc. Le Parc was born in Mendoza, Argentina in 1928. In 1958, he moved to Paris, where he became part of GRAV, Groupe de Recherche de Visual Art. This group were a collective who were appalled by the dead feeling of museums in Paris. They wanted to bring them alive with kinetic art, with op art, and Le Parc was a crucial part of that. They also wanted to diminish the power of the individual artist and replace it with collective effort. They were very much part of that 1960s embracing of radical alternative art. Parc himself was deeply politically protested against the South American dictatorships and was very much involved in the 1968 student uprising in Paris, which he played a big part. Anyone who knows this vlog and anyone who's watched this vlog will know I'm a massive fan of installation art, of op art, of being immersed and engaged. So with Le Parc being one of the kind of 1960s founding fathers, I am super excited to take you inside this show. It's on, by the way, all the way until May 2027. I think it's probably the first show I brought you on this vlog, which is going to be shooting next year. It's £15 to get in. It's booking out actually on Saturdays. It's obviously there's going to be, because of the nature of the art, there's going to be limited admission. Come and join me as we head inside and explore the world of Julio Le Parc. I'm going to be introducing each section using the text that accompanied the exhibition from Tate, and I'm going to also put some music on in the background. So do mute that if you want to just explore the works without my voice and the soundtrack as well. I should also just reiterate that there is flashing lights in some of these works. The first room looks at some of the works that Julio Le Parc began after he arrived in Paris in 1958. He started a series of drawings which he called black and white surfaces, and he was very strict in using only black, white and grey, and arranged geometric shapes according to precise mathematical rules or programs. As you can see here, the resulting grids and sequences led the eye across the surface of the picture, and in some of these black and white surfaces, if you're in the gallery, the shapes gradually rotate, creating the illusion of curves or spirals. In others, they seem to vibrate or flicker, and Le Parc wanted these visual effects to create a sense of movement and instability in the viewer's eyes. Le Parc himself said, "The systems I used most often were based on a progression from left to right, top to bottom and bottom to top, so that each form was closely linked to all the others. Their relationship depended on a pre-established system. The forms became anonymous, as did their relationships, in favour of an active surface capable of establishing a visual connection with the spectator." For us British art lovers, some of these works scream Bridget Riley, obviously. And from my research, Bridget Riley started doing her op art experiments in 1960, so just a couple of years after Julio Le Parc. But from my research, I don't think she was directly influenced by him. I think they came to the same kind of style and the same conclusions and the same desire to create these works independently. But do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong and you've got evidence that suggests otherwise. In the second room, we see Le Parc experimenting with light as a primary form. In works like this, continual light mobile, opaque, reflective or translucent forms sway in response to slight breezes. So there's a direct connection between us, the viewer, and the artwork, because we affect the movements through air currents in the room. We also see parts of his series continual light cylinders and contortions, and in these works, motorized light machines and reflective metal surfaces create the flowing patterns which you can see here. A work I wasn't able to capture was Le Parc's first large mobile, or a recreation of it, Continual Mobile, which is on view on the level 1 concourse of Tate Modern. My phone died, unfortunately, but do make sure that you go down and see this spectacular work. Le Parc said of these light experiments that they were part of his desire to move away from a fixed nature of art. The gallery quotes him saying, "These light and motion experiments were part of my desire to move away from the notion of a fixed, stable and definitive work. Spectators would find themselves standing in front of or surrounded by the unfolding of a multitude of changes." We, GRAV, thought that since the images are the result of simply placing several more or less complex elements in relation to one another, and not of the expert or inspired hand of the artist, these experiments constituted a way to demolish traditional notions about art, its creation, its spectacle, and its appreciation. And he said that in 1971. And in these works, Parc uses plastic motors, light bulbs, to create this sense of movement, which is really powerful in this sense of the bit of the show. Le Parc's contributions to GRAV's joint exhibitions, or labyrinths as they were called, included room-sized works that he called cells, where, unfortunately, we can't go into this one, there's a barrier, but you were meant to be surrounded by light effects and moving or interactive objects. And this installation you're looking at now in this room is based on Cell with Vibrating Light from 1968, which is included in one of the labyrinths. Another of Le Parc's contributions to GRAV included making several interactive works which responded to touch or pushing of buttons. He displayed these in groups called game rooms. As well as wanting spectators to be surprised by unexpected visual effects, Le Parc intended that they become aware of their active role in completing the artworks in direct or intuitive ways. He was fascinated by the connections created between people as they observed each other, often finding spontaneous ways of playing together. This work, Ensemble of 11 Surprise Movements, is one of the most interactive of the whole show. And Le Parc said, "It was not until 1964 that I was able to buy my first micromotors. I soon saw a way of grouping together some of these experiments and presenting them to a static viewer who could, by pushing a switch, observe the resulting changes as the installation suddenly sprang to life." Viewers' participation was not limited to pressing a button. Their surprise would cause them to relax their traditional stance, allowing them to adopt immediately an active and varied behaviour. This room is full of these kind of game-like experiments that you can see here. And for me, it summed up GRAV's philosophy of wanting to move the art galleries of Paris and now of the world away from this static place where we ponder static works of art. In Transformable Face, you literally create the art, as I did by moving the face around, to a very, very different effect, and rather gruesome, I'm sorry to say. Ribbons in the Wind from the 1980s shows that Le Parc was committed to interactive games throughout his career. The dramatic light and air blown by fans turns the game into a room installation, and this was probably my favourite work in the whole show. In the original version, spectators could actually walk into the artwork, becoming surrounded by the fluttering ribbons. But over time, Le Parc decided to turn the viewer's attention to the dancing ribbons and the shadows they cast on the wall. He intended the spectators still feel immersed in the work by sensing the air currents and being almost tickled by the ribbons. The show tells us that Le Parc often revisited and expanded on his older works, and he returned to his continual light mobiles of the 1960s, and he produced a wide range of new mobiles, including Blue Sphere 2001-2022. And these recent mobiles appear to hover above the surface, and there's almost like an explosion which has been brought together. The final room is a much more traditional room, and we almost kind of loop back to the first room, which is also about static works. The exhibition tells us that Le Parc began his systematic study of colour in 1959, and he developed a palette of 14 colours from across the spectrum, always using them in pure form, often all together in the same work. Le Parc often worked in series, and I'll leave you to explore these works in the final room before sharing my thoughts on this show and whether it's one that you should visit or not. Well, I very much hope you enjoyed that exploration of the Julio Le Parc show from Tate Modern. It's obviously really hard sometimes to capture the full effects of these light-filled works, but it hopefully gave you a sense, and I do recommend that you head along to Tate Modern sometime between now and May 2027 to experience this with your own eyes if this kind of work and art interests you. Julio Le Parc died on the 30th of May 2026, just before this show was getting into full swing, which is a real pity because it was a really nice, fitting retrospective to his whole career. And I really enjoyed the fact that we saw works from the late 50s all the way through to the 2020s as well. That was really special. And I always think about these shows in terms of the good, the bad and the beautiful. And there were several things I really enjoyed. First of all, just superficially, this is a very fun show. In fact, it's one that if you have children and you want to introduce them to art in a way which isn't ponderous and serious, then to come along to Tate Modern, because hopefully you saw there is a load of interaction in this show, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's fun, and adults get as much out of it as kids, but it'd be a particularly good one for kids. And even the works where you don't interact, some of them are visually spectacular and they stop you in your tracks. And it's a show you could spend 15-20 minutes in, or a lot longer, as I did. So I do recommend that you come for that reason. Secondly, I really liked the tension that I picked up between the fact that in some ways these works were very of now. Vibrating light, for example, wouldn't be full out of place in any installation setting of a contemporary artist. And in some ways, the works were even futuristic. Yet in others, they were very stuck in their time. This was the spirit of the 1960s. So I like that tension between the modern, the contemporary, and the fact that these seem to be works that were from a very specific time in history. And linked to that, I love the spirit of GRAV, taking us away from pondering at static works on walls and bringing galleries alive. This show did that incredibly successfully. And there were some really beautiful works here as well. And finally, I really like the way that the curators transitioned this show. So the first rooms are quite dark and your eyes are drawn to these stunning light works. And then as you progress through the show, after Vibrating Light, the rooms begin to lighten up and become flooded with colour. And that reaches its apotheosis in the final room. Now, in terms of the bad, I did find that final room much less compelling than the rest. The spirit of Julio Le Parc and GRAV was to bring work alive. And this work, partly because it was responding to what had come before, and partly because I didn't think it was very good art, was curiously static. So that room was a little bit of a sort of letdown right at the end. But generally, I really enjoyed the show. And just one other small thing, and this is not the fault of Tate. Obviously, some of these works, like Vibrating Light, to a certain extent, Ribbons in the Wind, were meant to be interacted with more physically than we're allowed today. There are barriers up where there weren't in the 1960s. It'd be lovely to experience them as an art lover in the 1960s, and a GRAV show did, but I can understand why that's not possible. In terms of the beautiful, my favourite work by far actually was Ribbons in the Wind, because it had that interactive element and it created these ribbons out of paper, almost looks like toilet paper or fabric, a beautiful like artwork, and it's also clunky and noisy as well. It kind of fills the galleries with the noise of the motors. So I really enjoyed that. I probably, like, quote unquote, had a go on it or activated it 5 times. I kept coming back to it when there was no one else in the room just to be able to experience it because it was really beautiful. Overall, I'm going to give this show, I was umming and ahhing, I was thinking of a 7.5 out of 10. I think actually I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because, as I said in my introduction, I love immersive, interactive art when it's done well. These days, it's often not done well. But this show did remind us of where the spirit of lots of that interactive art came from. Will I be back? Yes, lots of times. I'm going to take people I know who I think will enjoy this, including some younger art lovers, because I think they'll really vibe with it. So overall, I do recommend that you go along to this show, which, as I say, is on until a long time into 2027. Do stay tuned for Anish Kapoor, Frida Kahlo, and many other vlogs coming hopefully semi-regularly on Fridays. And thank you ever so much for watching.